Joe, good morning.
Good morning.
Sir, the Supreme Court is nearing the end of its term, but I wonder what you think of how they've been so far. Now, with two Trump-appointed justices, it's been interesting. Last week we had the Bladensburg cross case that ended with a 7-2 decision in favor of keeping the cross in place. And there have been a bunch of decisions like this where the court has not broken down on purely partisan lines. What do you make of that?
Well, some of these issues have been hanging around for a long time. For example, the Bladensburg cross reflects a complete dissatisfaction with the standard that evolved over the years about what constitutes the establishment of religion. And it led to all these goofy cases and unnecessary litigation. And the court is now trying to fashion a new test so that they don't have this stuff happening. And we'll see what happens. It's like every other First Amendment issue. It's got to evolve, and if it involves religion, there's going to be a million people that don't want the public square to ever be touched by anything that remotely resembles religion, even though the founders of our country never contemplated the type of severance that the Supreme Court set up in a series of cases. Anyway, I think that regime is coming to an end. It'll take a few more cases, but the Cross case was very important because it indicated that there's a view on the court that the court has overreached in limiting religion in public places.
We're waiting to get the ruling on the census citizenship question. Have they signaled at all as to which way they're going to go on this?
No, just the oral argument, which, we all know sometimes tells you something and sometimes doesn't, which means it's useless. But generally speaking, the majority of the court seemed quite sympathetic to allowing a question back on the census form, which had been on the census form for 100 years. So all the opposition to this is purely political by the Democrats and left-wing groups, which want to keep a question about citizenship off the ballot, because if people are afraid to answer the ballot, the censorship form, obviously that changes the numbers. California and New York and states like that rely on large numbers of people being in their states so they can get funds under allocation formulas, and also so that they can keep congressional seats that they might otherwise lose as a result of citizens leaving their states to go elsewhere because of high taxes. So they would like to count illegal immigrants and people not here legally so they can keep congressional seats. The court is going to allow the citizenship question. I mean, it's such a stupid issue. The fact that it had to be resolved by the Supreme Court is actually quite silly.
The Supreme Court also considering partisan gerrymandering and whether or not it amounts to an unconstitutional gerrymandering in states including Maryland and North Carolina. What's your sense of that case?
Well, these are very fact-specific cases. What did they do? What did the legislature say? What kind of legislation did they pass? What were the hearings? What was said on the record? These are all basically trials by the Supreme Court after litigation in the lower courts. The court doesn't like to get involved in these things because they're basically political decisions. But at a certain point, and they have allowed a lot of crazy behavior over the years leading to strangely shaped districts, part of it was due as a result of many of these districts were created to give blacks entire congressional districts to represent, so they could have some representation, and they weren't obliterated out of representation by districts which, basically showed the honesty of their numbers in the population. So this started out as an affirmative action program. It became a disaster. It's now a monstrous abuse of political power, and the court finally had enough of it, and I assume they're going to strike down some, they're going to allow others, create some nonsensical test that no one can understand, and we'll be back again in 5 years.
Yesterday, Trey Gowdy told Fox News that his attitude towards Robert Mueller's probe changed after he saw this transcript of a conversations between the FBI and George Papadopoulos. There's been rumors that these transcripts showed maybe something exculpatory. What can you tell us about this? What do you know about it?
Well, first of all, it's Trey Gowdy, so you never know what's going on. I mean, he's been all over the ballpark. I mean, one day he's in, one day he's out. One day the FBI is, your mother's best friend. The next day they're rapists. Trey Gowdy, I assume, is talking about the information that was held from the FISA court in the 4 applications that showed that Stephanopoulos had actually made statements showing that he didn't know what the hell people were talking about. Mm-hmm. with Dr. Mifsud and others trying to plant information with him. There's never been any doubt, there's no big secret here, that the FBI knew that George Papadopoulos was not a criminal, just as they knew that Carter Page, who had been cooperating with them for years as a U.S. asset against Russian agents, was not a Russian asset. So what you have here is ultimately a revelation concerning the fact that the FBI and senior Justice Department officials in the Obama administration lied to the FISA court and other courts in getting search warrants and FISA warrants in order to put the pressure on Papadopoulos. Look, make no mistake about this. As these little bits and pieces fall out about Papadopoulos and Carter Page, these guys were framed. They were framed by the FBI, which was trying to figure out a way to make a new case against Trump because the original case against him collapsed into a pile of goo. And what there were a bunch of dishonest people at the Justice Department, John Carlin, Sally Yates, you name it. I mean, they were a bunch of sleazeballs at the DOJ, and they have done irreparable harm to the institution of the Department of Justice. And for anybody who thinks that the FBI has been reformed as a result of James Comey leaving, which was a very good start, all they have to do is watch how Christopher Wray has been opposing and obstructing the release of documents in order for him to protect the institution of the FBI. Christopher Wray is a public embarrassment to the employees of the Bureau. He spends his time going around the country visiting agents and different districts of the FBI to boost morale. I mean, it's literally an embarrassment. The guy's on a milk carton. They can't find him when they need him to do the real work at the department. But as far as Papadopoulos and Page, this is more of the same, more lying by the FBI and senior Obama DOJ officials, and it'll play out. We'll see what happens. We'll see what Durham does. Durham, by the way, is working very fast, and he is digging very, very deep. He has offices in Washington, D.C., and he meets regularly with the senior people at the department.
Joe, in about 30 seconds or so, could you give us a sense of when you expect we'll see declassified documents, the president granting that authority to Bill Barr, and also the IG report?
I don't know. I think Horowitz is in deep trouble because of the information that's been withheld from him by Chris Wray. I also think that Horowitz has evidenced recently that he has great difficulty pulling the trigger and blaming FBI officials, DOJ officials. I'm losing confidence in Horowitz's ability to tell anything that's of any value. And as far as a declassification, now that Durham's in charge, I wouldn't hold my breath.
Wow. All right, Joe. Thank you so much. Have a great week.
You bet.
Appreciate you.